is my reserved spot.
Hi.
I need you to move your vehicle.
Your spot?
Yeah, right. You're
The
lying.
sign right there
I
has
don't
my
care what
name.
you say. People like you always try to take what isn't yours. You think I'm stupid?
Ma'am, I'm just asking you to check the sign.
No, ma'am. I know what you're trying to pull. You don't look like you belong here. You hear me?
Go ahead.
The security camera positioned up high on the courthouse's rear wall had captured countless dull hours of absolutely nothing going on in that lot. Vacant parking spaces, maybe a bird now and then, an attorney scrolling through his phone, but on this specific Tuesday afternoon at 2:47 p.m., that camera recorded something destined to spread like wildfire nationwide and completely wreck the existence of one incredibly entitled lady who committed the absolute worst blunder of her life. Before we keep going, let me know where you're tuning in from. Leave your country or state down in the comments section. And if you haven't done it yet, smash that subscribe button, because what unfolds next is totally insane and you definitely don't want to miss content like this. The lot behind the courthouse was compact and peaceful, maybe 15 parking spaces altogether. Most were standard spots for courthouse staff and people visiting, but smack in the middle, absolutely impossible to overlook, sat a space with a substantial metal sign reading, "Reserved for Judge Dwayne Morrison," in thick black lettering. This sign wasn't tiny, it wasn't concealed, it was positioned right there at eye level, obvious as anything. At 2:43 p.m., a white sport utility vehicle entered the lot. Behind the wheel sat a lady named Ruby. According to people who later came forward with her identity, she was somewhere in her early 50s with cropped blonde hair arranged in that specific style that somehow always appears in these types of clips. She had sunglasses on, even though the sun wasn't particularly bright, and she maneuvered like she ran the whole place. Ruby looped around the lot one time. 3 open regular spaces sat available toward the rear, but those spaces didn't interest Ruby. She craved the spot nearest to the back door of the courthouse. And that particular space just so happened to be the one with the prominent sign declaring it reserved for a judge. Did Ruby notice the sign? The camera's perspective captures her vehicle stopping for a beat directly in front of the space. She must have spotted it. But whatever thoughts ran through her head in that instant, she concluded the sign didn't concern her. She steered straight in, positioned her vehicle directly beneath that reserved marker, and climbed out. Ruby snatched her purse, secured her doors with a chirp, and began heading toward the courthouse door. She carried herself with the assurance of somebody who'd never heard the word no her whole life. That particular stride that announces, rules exist for everyone else. 4 minutes after that, at 2:47 p.m., another car pulled into the lot. This one was a modest, dark sedan, tidy but not extravagant. The driver advanced slowly and came to a stop right behind the white vehicle occupying his designated space. The guy who emerged was Dwayne, a black gentleman in his mid-40s. He had on everyday clothing that day since he'd been attending a training session across town and was merely swinging by his office to collect some documents before going home. No judicial robes, no business suit, just slacks paired with a polo. Dwayne stood there briefly, staring at the vehicle in his space. The footage captured him giving a slight headshake, the kind you make when something's irritating but not shocking. This clearly wasn't his first rodeo with someone parking in his reserved area. It occurred perhaps once every couple of months. Typically, it was an innocent error, somebody not paying enough attention. They'd say sorry and relocate their car. Not a huge issue. Dwayne headed toward the courthouse door, likely intending to have security broadcast an announcement inside for whoever owned the vehicle to move it. But before he made it to the entrance, the door swung wide. Ruby emerged back outside. She'd evidently been inside for merely a minute or two, perhaps handing something off or posing a quick inquiry at one of the offices. Now she was returning to her vehicle, keys already gripped in her hand. Dwayne spotted her and adjusted his path, approaching her in a composed manner. The security footage has no sound, but according to subsequent testimony and accounts, Dwayne courteously informed her she'd parked in his designated space and requested if she could kindly relocate her vehicle. Ruby halted her movement. She pivoted to confront him completely. Even without audio, you can witness the precise instant her facial expression transformed. Her entire body language switched from neutral to hostile in a split second. She gestured at Dwayne, then toward her vehicle, then back at Dwayne. She was unmistakably refusing. Dwayne motioned to the sign, that large, unmistakable sign right there. He indicated it, then gestured to himself, maintaining his calm. Ruby glanced at the sign. Then she looked back at Dwayne. And this is the point where everything spiraled completely out of control. Ruby advanced closer to Dwayne, violating his personal boundaries. Her lips were moving fast. Her hands were gesturing wildly. The camera registered her examining Dwayne from head to toe with a look of absolute disbelief and revulsion. Subsequently, witnesses positioned inside the courthouse who could detect the disturbance through the windows documented what Ruby genuinely stated during this confrontation. She informed Dwayne there was zero possibility that parking space belonged to him. She claimed he was being dishonest. She declared people like him constantly attempt to steal things that aren't theirs. She insisted she understood what scheme he was running and she wasn't buying it. People like him. Dwayne remained standing there, his facial expression barely shifting. The camera reveals him taking a slight step backward, providing Ruby room, his hands observable at his sides in an unthreatening stance. He was executing everything correctly, everything composed, everything properly. But Ruby was merely warming up. She extracted her phone. She raised it and aimed it straight at Dwayne's face, filming him. She moved around him somewhat, capturing various perspectives, talking continuously. From the camera's broad view, you can observe her putting on a performance. This wasn't simply rage. This was theater. Ruby was manufacturing her personal account of what happened, her personal video proof. She was recording what she likely intended to upload online or display to authorities, depicting herself as some sort of target being bothered in a parking area. The irony is excruciating. There she was filming Dwayne on her device, while the genuine security camera overhead was recording the absolute truth of what was genuinely transpiring. Dwayne retrieved his personal phone at this juncture. If she planned to record, he would too. He raised it calmly, not advancing toward her, merely creating documentation. This drove Ruby absolutely wild. She began yelling louder. Her available hand was jabbing in his direction. She took steps nearer, getting right up close to him. The body language was combative, confrontational. Dwayne maintained his position but didn't advance toward her. He simply kept his phone raised and remained calm. Quick question for everyone watching. Have you ever encountered someone this irrational? Type yes down in the comments if you've ever needed to maintain your composure when somebody was totally out of line. A modest crowd had begun assembling inside the courthouse. People detected the yelling. Multiple courthouse workers and security personnel emerged in the windows observing the scene, but nobody had ventured outside yet. Everything was unfolding rapidly. Ruby was now moving back and forth, still filming, still yelling. She returned to her vehicle and positioned herself in front of it as though defending it from being hauled away. She indicated the reserved marker and said something, shaking her head theatrically. Then she gestured at Dwayne once more and made a motion like she was shooing him off. She genuinely attempted to shoo him away from his personal parking area at his personal workplace. Dwayne ultimately lowered his phone and headed toward the courthouse door. He was evidently finished attempting to rationalize with Ruby. Time to involve security. But Ruby wasn't finished with him. She pursued him, continuing to record, continuing to shout. She walked directly behind him toward the courthouse doors, her voice bouncing off the brick exterior. Other individuals could absolutely hear everything at this point. Dwayne reached the entrance and pulled it open. He stepped through. Ruby attempted to follow him inside, but a security guard materialized in the doorway, obstructing her route. The guard, a substantial man in uniform, raised his hand. He said something to Ruby. From the body language observable through the glass entrance, he was unmistakably instructing her to settle down and remain outside. Ruby didn't settle down. She launched into shouting at the security guard now, gesturing past him at Dwayne, who was visible inside the structure. She was insisting on something, likely insisting that Dwayne be expelled or apprehended or who knows what. The security guard shook his head. He uttered something quick. Then he stepped completely outside, pulling the entrance closed behind him and positioned himself between Ruby and the door. 2 additional security guards exited through a side entrance. Now 3 courthouse security officers were standing in the lot with Ruby attempting to determine what was occurring. Ruby shifted into complete performance mode. She indicated her vehicle. She indicated the sign. She pointed toward the direction where Dwayne had entered. She displayed her phone, replaying her footage. She was expressive, emotional, performing the victim part flawlessly. One of the guards walked over to examine the parking marker. He studied it for an extended moment. Then he returned to Ruby and communicated something. Ruby's hands moved to her hips. She shook her head vigorously. She pointed at the structure. According to subsequent accounts, the guard had just notified her that the space was in fact reserved for one of the judges and she needed to relocate her vehicle. Ruby declined. She folded her arms across her chest and planted her feet firmly. The universal body language for, "I'm staying put and nobody can force me otherwise." The three security guards exchanged glances. One of them spoke into his communication device. Inside the courthouse, Dwayne had proceeded straight to the administrative office. He was familiar there, naturally, since he worked there. He calmly described the circumstances to the personnel. A woman had parked in his spot and was currently creating a disturbance outside. The office personnel looked through the window and observed Ruby in the lot, encircled by security, still disputing. One of the administrators, an older woman who'd been employed at the courthouse for 20 years, squinted through the window at Ruby. Then she looked at Dwayne and inquired if he wished to file charges for harassment or have the vehicle removed. Dwayne considered it briefly. Then he said something that made the administrator grin. He expressed he wanted to address this formally, appropriately. He wanted everything recorded. Back outside, Ruby was still declining to relocate her vehicle. The security guards were attempting to clarify that she'd be towed if she didn't move willingly. Ruby was indifferent. She initiated another tirade about her rights and how she was experiencing discrimination and how this was America and she could park anywhere she pleased. The entitlement was staggering. Then the courthouse rear door opened once more. Dwayne walked out, but he wasn't by himself this time. He was joined by another judge, an older white gentleman who turned out to be the senior judge at that courthouse. Following them were two administrators and the head of courthouse security. This was now formal. Ruby spotted Dwayne returning outside and instantly started up again, gesturing at him, shouting about harassment. She appealed to the older white judge, likely assuming he'd support her position. That assumption was an error. The senior judge regarded Ruby with the type of frigid, severe expression that can silence a chaotic courtroom in moments. He uttered something concise. Ruby's mouth clamped shut mid-statement. The senior judge then motioned to Dwayne and said something additional. He indicated the parking marker, then back at Dwayne. The instant Ruby comprehended what was happening, her face transformed. The color vanished from her complexion. Her eyes widened. The man she'd been screaming at, accusing, disrespecting, and racially profiling for the previous 15 minutes was a judge, not merely any courthouse worker, a judge. And she was positioned in his reserved parking area at his workplace where he held authority. After generating a massive spectacle, Ruby started retreating instantly. Her entire demeanor shifted. She began talking rapidly, generating excuses. According to witness accounts, she attempted to assert it was all a confusion. She stated she didn't realize. She claimed the sign wasn't obvious. She insisted if he'd simply informed her he was a judge, she would have relocated immediately. But the security footage doesn't lie. The footage reveals Dwayne indicating the sign, reveals him attempting to peacefully resolve it, reveals Ruby becoming combative, reveals her pursuing him and harassing him. The senior judge had no interest in her justifications. He stated something sharp and gestured toward her vehicle. Ruby practically sprinted to her car. She fumbled with her keys, got inside, fired up the engine, and reversed out of the spot so quickly she nearly struck the curb. She pulled into one of the standard spaces at the rear of the lot, distant from everyone. But the damage had been inflicted. Dwayne remained there with the senior judge, the security crew, and the administrators. They conversed for several minutes, everyone glancing over at Ruby's vehicle periodically. Dwayne displayed his phone with his recording. Security mentioned they possessed the security footage as well. Ruby stayed in her vehicle, likely hoping this would all simply dissipate, likely thinking that now that she'd relocated her car, everything would be acceptable. She was mistaken. 20 minutes afterward, a police cruiser entered the lot, not courthouse security, genuine city police. 2 officers emerged and entered the courthouse. They remained inside for roughly 10 minutes. When they returned outside, they proceeded directly to Ruby's vehicle. Ruby lowered her window. One officer leaned down to communicate with her. The exchange lasted multiple minutes. Ruby was shaking her head. She appeared to be weeping now. The officer straightened up and stated something else. Ruby exited her vehicle. The officer conversed with her for a while longer, documenting notes. Then he handed her something, a piece of paper. Ruby had just received a citation. The precise violations would emerge later, but she was being cited for trespassing in a restricted parking zone and for disorderly behavior. But that was merely the start. Over the following week, the courthouse submitted an official grievance against Ruby. The security footage was examined by numerous individuals. Witness statements were gathered from everyone who'd witnessed or heard the incident. Dwayne's phone recording was incorporated into the file. The security team's recordings were added as well. The evidence was crushing. Dwayne didn't dismiss this. And honestly, why should he? This wasn't simply about a parking area. This was about the blatant disrespect, the racial profiling, the presumption that a black man in everyday clothes couldn't possibly be someone of authority or significance. This was about Ruby feeling so entitled that she believed she could park anywhere she desired, scream at anyone she desired, and experience no repercussions. Dwayne submitted a civil lawsuit against Ruby for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Ruby likely thought he wouldn't pursue it, likely thought it wasn't worth his effort, likely thought she could simply pay a minor fine and continue with her existence. She was mistaken again. The lawsuit progressed. Ruby attempted to defend herself initially, asserting she was the genuine victim. She attempted to utilize her phone footage as proof. But when Dwayne's attorneys presented the complete security footage from the courthouse, displaying the entire incident from beginning to end, Ruby's account of events crumbled completely. The footage displayed everything. Her parking in the explicitly marked spot, Dwayne politely approaching her, her hostile reaction, her getting in his face, her pursuing him, her refusing to relocate even when security instructed her to, all of it. Ruby's attorneys, likely recognizing this was unwinnable, recommended she settle. The settlement sum was not publicly revealed, but sources familiar with the case stated it was considerable. Enough to make Ruby feel it, enough to make it sting. But the money wasn't even the most devastating part for Ruby. The story escaped. Local media covered it, then regional media, then it became national. The headline was too flawless to disregard. Woman harasses black judge in his personal parking spot, gets sued. Ruby's identity was connected to the story. Her face was displayed in certain reports. People who knew her witnessed it. Her employer witnessed it. Her community witnessed it. According to subsequent reports, Ruby lost her employment. The company she worked for released a statement declaring they don't tolerate discriminatory conduct and had separated from her. Ruby attempted to claim she was being cancelled, but the proof was too definitive. She'd harassed a man, made racially charged remarks, and created a scene at a courthouse. Those aren't things that simply get brushed aside. Her social media profiles were inundated with comments. She ultimately deleted most of them or made them restricted, but the internet never truly forgets. Dwayne, conversely, received backing from his colleagues, the legal profession, and the public. People commended him for how calmly he managed the situation, for not losing his composure, for following appropriate procedures, for holding Ruby responsible through the legal system rather than descending to her level. The courthouse also implemented modifications after the incident. They installed extra security cameras in the parking zone. They erected more prominent signage for reserved spots. They established a more stringent towing policy for unauthorized vehicles. And they introduced improved training for security personnel on how to manage conflicts swiftly before they intensify. The senior judge at the courthouse conducted an interview about the incident. He didn't identify Ruby specifically, but he discussed the significance of treating everyone with respect and how assumptions rooted in appearance or race have no place in society, particularly not at a courthouse where justice is meant to be impartial. He also commended Dwayne for his professionalism. He stated that Dwayne managed an ugly situation with grace and dignity, and that his response was a blueprint for how people should address discrimination and harassment in the contemporary era. Document everything. Remain calm. Utilize the system. Hold people responsible. What's your take? Did Ruby receive what she earned, or was it excessive? Share your thoughts below. The security footage itself became somewhat of an educational resource. Law enforcement training courses utilized it as an illustration of how to de-escalate situations and how not to conduct yourself when confronted. Diversity and inclusion seminars displayed it to showcase implicit bias and entitlement in action. Ruby became an illustration, a warning story, a Karen who pushed things too far and suffered the consequences. Months following the settlement, a reporter attempted to contact Ruby for commentary. She refused to speak publicly. Her attorney issued a short statement expressing she regretted the incident and had grown from it, but provided no genuine apology or responsibility. Dwayne also didn't speak extensively publicly about the case after it was resolved. He issued one statement through his attorney, expressing he hoped the result would remind people that actions carry consequences and that everyone merits being treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or what they're wearing. He returned to work, returned to his courtroom, returned to his reserved parking area, which now featured an even larger, more obvious sign, and was monitored by 3 separate cameras. The entire incident from beginning to conclusion lasted under 30 minutes in that lot. But the repercussions lasted significantly longer. Ruby discovered the hard way that you can't simply behave however you desire without confronting repercussions. That the individual you're screaming at might possess more authority than you presume. That racial profiling and entitlement can demolish your life when you select the wrong target. And Dwayne demonstrated something significant too. That remaining calm functions. That following the appropriate channels functions. That you don't need to respond to ignorance with rage. You can respond with patience, documentation, and the law. The security camera on the rear wall of that courthouse remains there, still recording, still monitoring that lot, likely still witnessing the occasional person park where they shouldn't. But ever since that Tuesday afternoon when Ruby committed the worst decision of her existence, people have been considerably more cautious about verifying those reserved parking markers. Because you never know who you're genuinely dealing with. And in this situation, Ruby discovered the hard way. The man she believed she could intimidate, dismiss, and disrespect was a judge. Someone with the knowledge, resources, and resolve to guarantee she confronted genuine consequences for her conduct. And he executed exactly that. Justice was delivered, not in a courtroom that day, but in that lot, on that footage, and in that settlement. Ruby received precisely what she earned. And Dwayne reclaimed his parking space, along with an apology he never genuinely received in words, but absolutely received in consequences. Sometimes the finest revenge isn't shouting back, it's remaining calm, collecting evidence, and allowing the system to accomplish what it's designed to accomplish. Hold people responsible. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Smash that like button if you believe Dwayne handled this flawlessly, and subscribe for more stories where entitled people receive precisely what they deserve. Catch you in the next one.